This is a Questbridge AMA with Emmett and Hida, two current Northwestern students. The only thing I ask of the participants today is please keep it Northwestern uh, centered because Hida and Emmett do not have any knowledge of anything Questbridge related, and at most they have only heard of the name. So just keep it Northwestern related with your questions, and let's get. I'll let Hida and Emmett introduce themselves.
Sure, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Emmett. I am a graduating senior in computer science. So I graduate actually next in exactly 1 week. My classes are finishing up this weekend. I also transferred into Northwestern as a sophomore, so I spent my first year at a local commuter school called Northeastern Illinois University, and then I transferred in to NU. That's about all I have to say for now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Christopher. I'm a freshman. I just finished my freshman year at Northwestern. I'm majoring in piano performance and philosophy, and that is it.
All right, let's start with the first question. What was the process like applying to schools as a music major? This one is more geared towards you.
Right. Okay, so I think this is similar for a lot of schools but basically Northwestern has 5 different colleges or schools. So, and one of those is the School of Music. Basically what you have to do is you have to apply just directly into the music school, which is pretty much separate from the rest of the college or the rest of the university, more so than I think most of the other colleges. It's almost like its own application and own writing essays, and you have to send in your own audition tapes and whatnot. And then on top of that, if you'd like, you can apply into another one or two of the schools. So if you want to be in the music school as well as the School of Arts and Sciences, then you have to apply to each separately. But basically, applying as a music major, you have to understand that there is a music school that is separate from the rest of the university, or at least one of the 5 schools, and that you're applying directly into that school, which has its own questions and requirements and all that.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you, Hida. Emmett, so this question is for you. Does GPA even matter in computer science?
Yeah, so I assume this is is this with respect to applying to jobs once you're in college, or is this with respect to applying to colleges, like your high school GPA?
They were not specific, so
Okay.
can you hit on both?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
For applying to colleges, I would assume your GPA still matters. You could do, CS extracurriculars and personal projects and the like, but I would imagine that, is less impactful. I'm assuming that this question is with respect to jobs, because there's this perception that CS is more so than other fields meritocracy, where you have a lot of opportunities to showcase your skills. You could do, projects on the side. You can do CS research, and you can, perhaps most importantly, during the interview itself, show off your skills in a very objective way. You'll be given, at most places, interview questions that are very technical. Here's a problem. How would you solve this? And there is a correct answer. So there's, GPA is perhaps less important than it might be in other fields. I would say, though, that it might be hard to land those interviews in the first place with a low GPA. And if you have the requisite skills to do well in classes or to make really impressive projects on the side, then I would imagine, you're able to do your classwork pretty effectively too. So I imagine those are kind of correlated, having a high GPA and having the skills, which is kind of come full circle, maybe why people select based on it. So in short, I think it's probably less important than in other fields, but it still is important. I imagine there will be plenty of workplaces that filter out results based on GPA, because there are people both with good GPA and good technical skills.
All right, thank you for that, Emmett. Just a note to everyone who's going to be listening on the YouTube video and people here, I'll be referring to Hida as Christopher now. So next question is, this is to both Christopher and Emmett. Do you feel like the art and computer science departments are evenly strong? I think they mean like, do you think the humanities versus STEM departments are evenly strong? So, Emmett, do you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah, Chris will definitely be better equipped to answer this than I, because, or he can speak better to the humanities side, being a humanities dual major. But I have actually taken a fair number of humanities courses, as even in the College of Engineering, they require that you take at least 7 social science or humanities classes, and at least 4 of them have to map onto some kind of theme. So I've taken like history of contemporary art. I've taken a comparative lit class on natural languages and green worlds. I took just this quarter early modern philosophy with Chris, actually, and I also took a film course on the works of David Lynch. And then last year I took a film course on screenwriting, intro to screenwriting, and I thought that was really valuable. So all in all, I've been impressed with these courses. I thought the professors, most of them, were really dedicated to their craft, and they, are tapped into these networks of other professionals in their field. In the contemporary art course, there were some cool guest speakers, and there were events that tied into museums, both the museum on campus and museums in downtown Chicago. In the film course I'm taking now on David Lynch, we had a guest speaker who was a producer on 2 of the movies that we watched. And the professor is clearly very into the course material. He put a lot of effort into the class. So overall, I've been very impressed with the humanities curriculum, but I've only seen like 5 to 7 of those classes. So Chris can probably answer better.
Yeah. Well, I can't really, I'd say, look at this question like as a comparative question, as one or the other, or I guess comparing them. But just having taken a lot of humanities classes, in general, they're very good. I enjoy them, and I haven't really had a professor that hasn't been involved and helpful, and honestly probably willing to go way above and beyond. I haven't taken a lot of STEM courses, but I think, and this relates again to the fact that there are 5 separate colleges. So it's like when you're taking a STEM course, or specifically, and versus humanities, that will be in the same college, in the College of Arts and Sciences. But if you're specializing in a certain thing, such as engineering, right? There's an engineering school in which the classes are probably more focused. But in the general arts and sciences college, I would assume that all the professors I've met have been great. That's all I can really say. I haven't taken every course, unfortunately.
All right, thank you, Christopher and Emmett. One thing I'll add to their answer, guys, is if you guys are interested to see the comparison, just search up for STEM students out there. Search up Northwestern's whole brain approach. You'll see a good balance of humanities with the STEM in their engineering program. Moving on, the next question is, do you have time to enjoy the lake?
Yeah, so I'm gonna roll this together with the question of, would you say it's stressful academics wise? I think those both get at how much free time do you have, how stressful is it academically, and I should give a general disclaimer that this is going to depend a lot on your major, how quickly you as an individual get work done. There might be someone who can do a project in 5 hours and someone else who does a project in 10 hours. really depends. And it depends on what your goals are. Like how much socializing do you need to feel healthy and well rounded. What kind of grades do you want to get? So it all depends. But in my own experience, I would say I've been satisfied with the kind of work-life balance. I've had time to socialize and do my classwork and do some extracurriculars. My big thing, or one big yardstick that I can use, or one thing I can point to objectively, is like I always get 8 hours of sleep. Um, I'm pretty non-functional on less than that, so um, I've been able to do that and keep my GPA, and I have friends, so at least with some level of objectiveness, I can say, yeah, I mean, there's a balance. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I would probably agree with Emmett. I mean, personally, I've had a lot of free time in general. It's also I've only spent 1 year, and I'm sure it gets progressively harder as you go through the experience. But I think it's again dependent on the classes you take, but your advisors are also very helpful. And if you tell your advisor, or you're looking for assistance, and you say you want to finish in 3 years or something like that, well then there would probably necessarily be less time, less free time, because you'd be taking more classes, but there'd be a reason why you're taking more classes. So
Yeah,
if you do like the standard way through, it feels like there is definitely enough time and free time. And if you decide that personally you would like to take more classes for one reason or another, well then, I mean, you're going to have a little bit less time, but it's kind of just a choice that you have to make.
yeah, that's a good point that I didn't touch on. That the number of classes you take may also vary depending on whether or not you're a dual major. If you're trying to finish in fewer quarters, or you're trying to get a master's and squeeze that into however much time. Um, I feel that most students take 3 or 4 classes a quarter, but you can take up to 5. I'm in 5 right now, but most of the time I do 4, and I've done 3 before. So that will vary a lot. And then some classes are more intensive than others. I would say for my project-based CS classes, which is most of the like CS electives, there'll be like 4 or so projects throughout. It'll either be there's like 4 or so projects throughout the quarter, and those projects take a long time. You might be in the library on a given project for a total of like, could be anywhere from like 10 to 30 hours. I mean, maybe more if it's like a killer, but I mean, probably it depends on what your workflow is like. Or there'll be the kind of project, or there'll be the kind of course, like when I'm in now, code analysis and transformation, where you have an assignment every week. And that one was a partner class, and my partner and I usually got each homework done in like 6 to 10 hours. So, you figure you have class time, then for some of the more intensive courses, maybe like 6 to 10 hours a week. If it's a readings-based course, it depends on how fast you read and how thoroughly you want to do the readings, and how fast you write papers and stuff. So again, it can vary a lot, but I'm trying to throw out the numbers that I've experienced to give you kind of a concrete sense of things. But that's just for me what I've experienced personally.
All right, thank you guys, and thank you for actually combining those 2 questions. I actually didn't think of that, but that was actually really well put. I know this question will not be very relevant to Christopher or Emmett, but you guys can feel free to actually skip this one if you want. Can you talk about pre-med and resource available for pre-med students at Northwestern?
Yeah, so neither of us are pre-med. JDS, actually. We both know someone who is a senior in biomed engineering. If one of you is curious about pre-med, you could just DM me on Discord, and I can try to forward your contact information to them, and maybe they can answer your question, but I wouldn't know personally.
Yeah, I don't know a ton, but in my understanding, basically there's a pre-med track, uh, but there are various majors that you take while fulfilling that track to go into pre-med. So for instance, you can be majoring in neuroscience and then be on like the pre-med track, and then I guess then go to med school or afterwards, or um, continue your education. But basically, there are various majors that you can take that like coincide with the pre-med track. Um, yes, that's pretty much my understanding.
Yep. Thank you guys. Yeah, I know this was a little bit more difficult to answer due to your majors. Um, but and thank you for Emmett for the offer to the juniors. So next question is, what kind of housing does Northwestern offer, and how are the dorms?
So they have a 2-year on-campus housing requirement. So if you're freshman and sophomore year, you're required to be on campus, and I don't think it's common to get that waived, or I'm not even sure it's possible to get that waived.
If you're in Greek, you can leave on sophomore year. But
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wasn't sure how Greek life factored into that, because I know some people in Greek life live in a sorority or fraternity house their sophomore year, and then as a transfer, I transferred in as a sophomore and I was on campus for that, but then I was allowed to go off campus for junior year. The dorms themselves, especially the newer ones, are pretty nice from what I've seen. They're also pretty pricey, but yeah, I mean, no complaints about those. They're really pretty buildings. The dorms are, about the size that you would expect of a dorm. They're clean. They have social areas where you can socialize. Um, my experience on the dorms was I was living in a somewhat strange dorm because called Foster Walker Complex, and that's all singles. Um, so that was a bit unusual that I didn't have a roommate. Um, but I also knew a lot of people coming into the school, so I was never really seeking to socialize or meet people through my dorm. I would rather meet them outside of housing. That being said, it seems like the on campus housing office tries to put on a lot of social events. They have a weekly, for example, there's a dorm on the Southwest campus called Willard, and every week they have like a snacks night on Sundays at 8 p.m. and you can come through to that and hang out with people and eat snacks. And they try to organize things like that. Or I think in Foster Walker Complex, the Super Bowl weekend, they had like a Super Bowl viewing party and they ordered food for that. So like food-based social events and the like are put on by the campus housing administration.
Nice.
Yeah, but
Sorry, Christopher. Before Christopher speaks, the only way you can actually get a waiver out of the 2-year, living on campus requirement is a medical reason, is if I remember correctly. Sorry to interrupt you, Christopher.
no, no problem. Or I'm pretty just on that. I'm pretty sure also that's not including Greek life. If you get into a fraternity, I'm pretty sure you can stay in your sophomore year. But besides the point, I just wanted to briefly elaborate on what Emma was saying. All the dorms are definitely, yeah, I mean they're nice and they're obviously livable in. But it is, some dorms are obviously nicer than others, and I think each dorm also has its own culture, which is something that if you something you should want to look into if you're looking for a dorm to live in. As in, so for instance, I lived in a humanities residential college, which meant that most of the students in my dorm were interested in the humanities, and they gave talks and lunches and stuff like that with regard, that were related to the humanities, literature and philosophy and the like. Whereas other dorms, if you're very interested in being social and partying a lot, there are dorms for that. If you just want like a quieter dorm with fewer people, there's that. Basically, it depends on the dorm, and each one has its own culture, I'd say. Yes.
All right, thank you guys for that. So next question is Northwestern really isolated, or could you go into the city easily during weekends?
So the actual means by which you'd get into the city is almost certainly by train. You would take the Purple Line down to Howard, get on the Red Line, and take that down. So it's a train ride that lasts 40-ish minutes, and you can get right into downtown Chicago. I've done it before. I have a friend who's into improv, and he on occasion invites me to these improv things. Actually, during the week, like usually on a Thursday, and so it's. I could say from experience, it is doable to just get on a train, go downtown, hang out, and then come back. I wouldn't say it's easy to do. Um, you know, that's some time out of your day, but it's doable. Where that becomes maybe extra relevant is if you're interested in like the bar scene or like doing your socialization through like going out on the town. I would say downtown Evanston, which is a 5-minute walk from campus. Well, 5 to 20 depending on what end you're on. But downtown Evanston, which is walking distance from campus, doesn't have a ton going on. Like there's restaurants, there's a few bars, but it's not that lively. Um, and I think there are some students who go downtown to hang out, eat, drink, etc. But I think it is harder for them logistically, and so I've never really been too into that scene because it just, I don't like that anyway, and yeah, it's a bit of a hassle.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, people who don't go to Chicago that frequently, there isn't a ton going on in Evanston, but there's enough, and there's also enough going on campus, and there's also work and stuff like that to do. So from the people I've talked to and myself, it seems like when there's a reason to go into Chicago, yeah, to see a concert or something like that, it's easy enough to go, but it's not really something that I think most people do every weekend, just because it is a bit of a commitment, not a huge one, but still a commitment nonetheless.
All right, thank you guys. So the next question is a very broad one. I mean, this will feel like an essay question. Why Northwestern? And you guys can hit on as many points or as little points as you guys want. So Emmett.
Sure. Yeah, I'm also going to interpret this as kind of part of what made it stand out from other Questbridge schools, because it's kind of, why did you apply there instead of other places, and why did you, if you got into other places, choose to go to Northwestern?
Yeah. Actually, sorry, Emmett. So just for the sake of the people on the YouTube video, and like just to fill you guys in, Questbridge schools, guys, are usually T20 schools in the United States. So we're talking like all the Ivies besides Harvard and Cornell. We're talking Duke, Rice, U Chicago, Stanford, University of Southern California, University of Virginia, and a bunch of liberal arts schools I haven't got to. So that is what we're referring to when we say Questbridge schools. Yeah, please continue. Sorry.
Sure. So I should be upfront about the fact that I'm from Chicago, and I knew a fair number of people who go to Northwestern, so that definitely influenced my decision. And as I mentioned before, I am a transfer student, so I didn't actually apply to Northwestern my first time around. I applied to a very small number of schools, including some engineering-focused schools like Olin School of Engineering and Georgia Tech. And in retrospect, I think I wouldn't have liked it at either of those places, or an engineering focused school in general. Because even though I do genuinely really like engineering and it's coding is something I enjoy doing, I also do enjoy the humanities and I like hanging out with people who enjoy the humanities. So I would say Northwestern definitely checks off that box with respect to having a balance between people of different interests. So I kind of mentioned that before with talking about the curriculum being balanced, but the students are as well. So you can definitely interact with people you want to interact with. Um, and then, I mean, simply, academics was a big factor as well. In my second round of applications, I mostly applied to like big state schools. One of the contenders that I was considering was UW Madison, uh, and that has a really strong computer science program. But I mean, Northwestern has a strong CS program too, and it also just has some clout attached to the name, which is a non-negligible factor. Like employers do pay attention to that. So it was a combination of all those things: balance, strength of the program, and just proximity. And like I knew people who went there. That definitely made a difference.
When I was applying, to schools in general, I knew that I wanted to study music, but I also knew that I didn't want to only study music. Because I mean, I guess growing up that was just like a big part of my life, but it also wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I think Northwestern seemed like it had a very good balance between the two, in that it allowed and gave the opportunity for a high level of education in both music and other areas of academics. So I'd say that was the primary reason that I'd applied. That being said, there were a few other schools similar to that, and I don't know, when I visited Northwestern, it just seemed I don't know, the campus just seemed very together. People just seemed nice when I spoke to them. This is very vague, but it just kind of felt right on top of the fact that it was kind of in the perfect area for like the type of school that I wanted to apply to. And I don't think that that's exclusive to music. I think that same balance that people are looking for is probably similar for other areas of study.
Okay, thank you guys for that. So the next question is, what would you say Northwestern's culture is like?
Yeah, that's a bit tricky to answer. There's a couple different ways we could address this question. One is like school pride. I would say there's a fair amount of school pride. I mean, we've got part of that is good marketing, good branding, like Purple Pride. They hand out a lot of T-shirts. Go Cats. And I think there's more of that, especially if you're into sports. We have a Big Ten football team, and there are games that a lot of people decked out in purple go to. So I would say there's a fair amount of school pride. And even I'll admit personally, I didn't really have a lot of like school pride, for the first like 2 or so years that I was here. I was just like, yeah, I like it here, but this is kind of just where I'm getting my education. I like the people here. That's what I care about, not the school itself as an institution. But I think being in a club and just the more involved you are, the more you'll have that sense. If you're not involved in any clubs and you don't have any particular interest in the school, then you're not going to have a sense of school pride. And I think that's true regardless of where you go. Another kind of axis along which people look at schools is, is it like a party school or an academic school? And I would say it's more on the academic end of the spectrum. Like we said before, there's not a ton going on. It's not like situated in the middle of a big city where there might be a lot of partying, nor is it in like a college town where you would kind of get this vibe that it's like there's, you know, um, not a lot to do besides party, I guess. I've just noticed that with schools like, say, U of I, you're in the middle of a pretty a mostly rural area, so there's not a lot to do besides like party and such. So I would say it's more on the academic side of the spectrum, in my experience. But I think people who want to seek out uh, seek out that can find it pretty much wherever they go.
Yeah, I think I have a somewhat similar idea. I think it's hard to pinpoint like a specific or a particular culture that we can define the school by or like ascribe to it. Because I mean there are a lot of students, right? And there are a lot of just people on campus and in dorms at night and just generally in that area. And obviously not everyone is doing the same thing or having the same thoughts. Basically, it's there are enough people that it feels like you find your niche or the group or the quote unquote culture, like the thing you want to be doing with the people that you want to be doing it with, um, and it's small enough that you can know where things are and where people are, but it's not so homogenous that it's just um, one culture that 95% of the students are. I think everyone kind of has an idea of what they want to be doing and with whom, and so there are a bunch of different cultures, if you will.
All right, thank you guys for that. So the next question is, how is the food at Northwestern?
Hmm. It's pretty decent. Um, I don't know. I don't. I feel like that word says it all. It's decent. Um, it's gotten. They switched the food providing service for the on-campus dining 2 years ago or last year, I believe. Um, and it's better than what we had before. But yeah, I mean it's campus food. Most people live off campus as an upperclassman, and then just cook for themselves. There's also, I should say, you know, uh, a small but good selection of restaurants in downtown Chicago or sorry, not in downtown Chicago, in downtown Evanston that you can either walk to or get delivery from. So there's options.
Yeah, I guess decent's a pretty good word. I mean, I personally think it's pretty good. It's obviously not like spectacular food. I mean, as Emmett said, it is campus food. But I've never really had a complaint when I go to the cafeterias. There's always enough variety, and there are always vegetarian and dietary restricted options. Uh, in general, it's good. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's fine. It's eatable and pretty good usually.
All right. So the next question is there a lot of Greek life? And I'll add on to this question and say, like, eh, do you feel pressure to participate in it? And can you still make friends if you're not in the Greek life?
Yeah, so the raw numbers on it, I think, are something like 10 to 20% of the populace is in Greek life. I think closer to the 10 end of the spectrum. Um, but as to whether it feels like a larger representation than that, or if it feels like this pressuring force or like something that you kind of got to do, I would say no. Um, I I knew going into the school that I didn't really want to participate in Greek life. I do know like one or two people in Greek life, and so I've been to a few Greek life events, but no, I wouldn't say it's like it's not certainly a far cry from some schools where Greek life is the vast majority of the population, and um, it's kind of like a really big social status thing. I would say, I don't know, maybe it's a social status thing within a subset of the population that cares about it, but from my perspective, I've had plenty of options and have never really given it much thought, honestly. Like, much less had it like be something that restricts like my social activities.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually a bit more than like it's a pretty reasonable portion of people. I think definitely more than just like 20 percent, but even still, I definitely have not felt pressured or like that's the end all be all. Um, I also didn't really want to be a part of Greek life going in, and I still don't really want to, but I have friends who are going to be in fraternities and sororities next year. And it's a thing that is definitely there, and if you want to, you can do it. But I've never personally felt pressured or really anything about it at all. I think that's also might not be the entire perspective because I think it might be a little bit different for girls. Uh, I've heard that at times people feel like it's a status thing, but that could also just be the people that I've been talking to. I can say from my own experience, it hasn't really affected me at all. I haven't even really given it a thought. Um, but it is possible that that's not the case for everyone. I think it also has a large part to do with the emphasis you put on it, so how much you care about it or think about it.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention again that um, I came into the school knowing people already knowing like a fair number of people there. So my like socialization process or the process by which I met new people was like different from the norm. So it I can't really speak to what it would be like to get onto campus as someone who doesn't know anyone and try to meet people. Um, yeah.
All right, thank you guys. So the next two questions, I guess it's up for your own interpretation. I don't know how you want to address this one. I've heard that everyone's really complaining and cutthroat. Uh, Emmett, you want to start first? You can take it whatever way you want with this question.
Sure. Plating and cutthroat. I would. The closest thing I've experienced to that is that in among like engineers, particularly in computer science, there's I guess a fair number of people who are really invested in getting job opportunities, and are kind of like interested in the whole entrepreneurial startup Silicon Valley kind of lifestyle or feeling. And so they're applying to big tech companies. They um, uh, maybe place a lot of value in that or measure worth by that and things like that. Um, so that might be part of what this question is addressing. Or I'm not sure entirely how I'm supposed to interpret it, but yeah, I guess there's I wouldn't say I feel like cutthroat is still even if I'm talking about that, and even if, I feel like cutthroat is the wrong word to apply to it. It's more just like very very focused on that, and it's I don't know. I'm not really sure what situations there would be where it's helpful to be cutthroat, unless you're talking about like a social situation, which then I'm not really sure how to interpret it, or I can't really think of an example.
Would you
Um,
say it's more like competitive, like more competitive between classmates instead of cutthroat?
hmm. um, Even then, not really. Um, yeah, I feel like people aren't like trying to tear each other down or outdo each other. They're just trying to do the best they can. That might sound like some kind of PR answer, but that's honestly just what I've noticed. I can't really think of a time when, um, yeah, when I felt that way, when I felt otherwise.
That's completely fine. Christopher, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I I haven't really noticed people being competitive in classes and treating their classmates as like people to beat or anything like that. It doesn't feel at all that way in my experience. I'd say maybe the one exception perhaps would be in the music school specifically. While people in general are very, good to one another and kind and help people, um, when there are like actual concerto competitions or something like that, people can get competitive because it's a competition. But as far as that goes, I think it's actually much less cutthroat than I would have expected from other schools and from hearing about other schools. Outside of that, that's very small portion of Northwestern. I'd say I haven't noticed anything really as far as people being very cutthroat. I'm also only a freshman though, so it's possible that as we go through, people will get more competitive as they realize that their college experience is coming to an end and that they're going to be going into the workforce soon.
All right, thank you guys. So this next question too, it's up for interpretation for you guys. I guess they just want you to say Northwestern versus U Chicago. Which one's better? Um, it's up to you guys how you want to answer this one.
Well, we're gonna have an obvious bias. I also got waitlisted from U Chicago, so I'm still salty. But yeah, I mean Northwestern. Noting the bias, that's my answer.
Um, I mean, I'm gonna try to be objective. I think it probably just depends what you want to do. I think probably Northwestern's a little bit more flexible in majors and different things you can study. And I think U Chicago probably has a bit more. At least from what I've heard, there's a bit more work at U Chicago, so maybe it's a more rigorous experience or something. Um, yeah, it probably depends on the individual and what they want out of their experience. I mean, I'm enjoying Northwestern a lot, and so that's all I can really say.
Yeah, we can leave it at that. Uh, next question is, Christopher, this one is for you. Why do you want to major in philosophy at Northwestern?
Um,
Or you can
uh,
just answer the part of why you want to major in philosophy. Not
yeah, yeah. The Northwestern part I'd say was less of a factor. I think I picked, as I've said, Northwestern a little bit more because of music and then also the opportunity to do academics. The reason I chose philosophy, I guess throughout high school I was, and middle school I was more interested in humanities, which then was mainly just English and history. But at a certain point, I kind of realized that I really just liked, or was more intrigued by the concepts um, in the English courses and history courses that I'd take in high school, as opposed to the literature or the. I don't want to trivialize history or the dates though, or something like that. So philosophy seemed like the the way that you talk about concepts more broadly, more generally. I was also, before applying, I had done a bit of independent work in moral philosophy, and I took a class too, as well as in philosophy of mind. So I think it was just something that I found an interest in somewhat early on through my academic experience, even to middle school, and then into high school, I began to realize that philosophy specifically was what I found most intriguing, as opposed to other branches of the humanities.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. So the next question is it easy to find internships in the area, and have you gotten any? So I bet you probably want to answer this one. And Christopher, uh, I know COVID-19 this year really messed up the whole internship finding experience, but you can just talk about like what you expect you'll experience, and maybe like what opportunities there will be for humanities in the Northwestern area, Evanston, Chicago area. Right.
Yeah, so I had 3 kind of post Northwestern summers after my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and all of them have been good experiences that can at least partially be attributed to the university. The first one, the most obvious one, was that I did research over the summer on campus through a lab on campus called Collab Lab, and yeah, I felt like the resources to get me connected to doing research were really readily available. I just had to look up, Northwestern CS research, and there were about 11 different labs that I found right away and sent emails to. And I got started pretty much right away, doing some part-time work during the school year, and then continuing that full-time over the summer. So there's in a first category, I guess, research that's on campus. And then the other form of opportunities are, internships that you can get in the area and even elsewhere through career fairs. So for tech in particular, Chicago is a pretty big city, and there's a lot of opportunities. I would say a lot of the CS jobs in Chicago are finance or finance adjacent, but my junior year, I got an internship in Naperville, which is west of Chicago by about 40 minutes to an hour by train. And I did that over my junior year summer, the summer following junior year, with a company called Tibco, and I met them through a Northwestern career fair. And then finally, I had a similar experience this year where in the fall, I went to a Northwestern career fair. I talked to this group called Ab Initio, and I applied to them, and then went through the application process. And then I'm going to go work for them in September. I'll actually be starting remotely, but so that one was not in the Chicago area. They're actually situated in Lexington, Massachusetts, but that was they were present at the Northwestern career fair. So there's in short multiple career fairs that you can go to get access to internships, and I've had a high rate of success with that. I think there's something about meeting someone in person at a career fair that makes you more likely to proceed through the process. It shows an interest, that you went, and they can see how you present and how you speak to other people. There's also There's also just 2 more resources I wanted to mention, even though I haven't utilized them that much. There is the Engineering Career Development Office, which offers all sorts of workshops, resume building workshops, for instance, and can try to connect you to employers. And then there's Handshake, which is an online portal that you can use to kind of do job hunting or show yourself to employers, and employers can look you up and if they're seeking out Northwestern students. So Chicago has a lot of opportunities, and Northwestern is good at connecting you to those opportunities, in my experience, especially in tech. Maybe different for other fields.
So thank you, Emmett, on that. I just have one follow-up question. I think some people might have it too. For your research, like your research position sophomore year, was that paid or unpaid research?
That was paid research, and it was $15 an hour, which I think is I think a lot of labs offer similar compensation. Minimum wage in Chicago and Evanston, or in Chicago at least, is something like $13 an hour. So I
Okay.
think I would imagine most research positions on campus are similar to that.
All right. Thank you, Emmett. So Christopher, would you like to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I can't speak a lot about internships outside of Northwestern session, like the Chicagoland area, just because of COVID and all that. But well, as I was saying, there are fairly frequent career fairs where you can go and meet with employers and talk. And you can also probably talk with your advisors about this. Um, well, in general, as an undergraduate, just Northwestern specifically, not a independent internship or job, they offer research grants, I guess, to usually juniors and seniors. Um, I think you can do it once in your career at Northwestern, so you would have to apply for that, and then you can be paid to do an independent research project, and I assume that's what Emmett was speaking about. And then for the underclassmen, you you can also apply to be a research assistant to a professor, in which case maybe you took a course with a professor that you really liked, and the course material you thought was very interesting. So then you might reach out to that professor, and they might reach out to you, and then you could potentially work on a project together, and you'd be kind of an assistant helping with the project, and that is also paid, and that's also not just for the STEM subjects. So, for instance, if a philosopher wants to write a paper on, I don't know, like logic and modality or something, well, then you could talk with that professor and then potentially help them write that paper and do research and be paid by the school to do it if you apply together.
All right. Thank you, guys. So these two questions are from me. I know I haven't seen anyone ask about the quarter system yet, so I would like you to, like Emmett and Christopher, to just expand a little bit on it, especially since you guys did allude to it in a previous answer, and just explain what the quarter system is and how is it at Northwestern.
Sure. So the kind of factual rundown is that there's 3 quarters at Northwestern per year, as well as an optional summer quarter. Um, and so, like it's just like a semester in that you take one set of classes for each quarter. There could be a class that is broken up into 2 parts, and you take one in one quarter and then the other part in a subsequent quarter. But yeah, they're just like semesters, but shorter. They're roughly 11 to 13-ish weeks long. We tend to start in mid to late September, and then we go until just usually the second week of December, with a short Thanksgiving break in the middle or near the end. And then there's a 1 month long break for the holidays, and you come back in early January, go till late March, then have spring break, and then you come back in April, like usually first week of April, and then you go until mid-June. As for how, and then there's also reading week, although engineers don't get reading week, so Chris could speak more to that. Also, this quarter was strange because of COVID. It was slightly shortened to about 9 weeks or so. As for how it is, I find that professors usually make the most of the time and kind of hit the ground running. So, classes might have, the first day of a class might be, the first half of the first day of a class might be going over the syllabus, but usually then they actually get into the actual content right away. And the quarter system also gives you some flexibility in that, it just lets you take a lot of classes. So over the whole academic career. So depending on your requirements, you might only need to take like 3 or 4 classes a quarter, and so there will be a lot of content in those classes, but you can kind of focus on them a lot. Um, that's been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add, but basically, as Emmett said, there are 3 quarters during the year, and then a summer quarter. And in each quarter, you'd probably take less classes than you would in a semester at another school, depending on what you're doing. But each class would be, I guess, doing a full semester's workload, but in, I guess, 2/3 of it. Sorry, I haven't done the math. Anyway, the point is, so the benefits then are basically that you can, pursue an interest right after. If you find a new interest in the first quarter, for instance, then you can start pursuing that in the second quarter. Or if you decide you don't really want to do something, you don't have to continue for like a full semester. You can stop after a quarter. And then the drawback potentially is that sometimes classes, because you're taking a full class in less time, even if you're taking less classes, the work might run away from you if you're not on top of it. But that really depends on which classes you're taking. So yeah.
Alright, guys. So, last question to end this AMA is: what is the advice you would give to someone pursuing computer science at Northwestern? And so this is for Emmett, and then Christopher, humanities/music at Northwestern.
Um, it's hard to give, just one broad piece of advice, but I would say, pick your classes carefully. Thanks to the quarter system that we just mentioned, you have a lot of opportunities to take classes. And we should also mention that Northwestern has a pretty generous dropping class policy where you can for most classes, you can drop classes late as like the 6th week, so more than halfway through the quarter. And it doesn't go on your record at all. So it's actually somewhat common for people to sign up for more classes than they actually intend to take, and then that's some kind of trial classes for a week or 2 or longer even, and then you might find halfway through the quarter, if you're finding a class not fulfilling or wasn't the right class for you, you can drop it, and go down to the number of classes that you actually intended to take. So doing that can kind of let you scope out classes, particularly with CS electives, where there's a whole bunch of them offered. Some of them are staples that are offered, pretty much every quarter. Some of them are offered only like once a year, so you kind of have to plan in advance. Ooh, if I want to take networks, it's only being offered in the winter this year. I could wait till next year. But I think there's going to be some cool electives in the spring, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, plan your courses carefully. Take advantage of the fact that you can drop classes to kind of scope out and determine which classes you're interested in taking, because, taking something you're interested in is just much more rewarding and much easier than forcing yourself through a class that you're not interested in. That would be my biggest takeaway.
I'm gonna answer humanities and music separately, but I'd say for humanities, and it's probably dependent on what major specifically you're in, because there are differences for sure. For me, at least, it's very helpful to not necessarily do more work than what's assigned, but just to take time with the things you're reading and just think about them, talk with people about them. They don't have to be in your class, just because there are a lot of things to digest when you're reading, texts that have been around for hundreds of years. You're obviously not just going to get it after reading it. So just taking time to think about them. You don't have to write anything necessarily. has been helpful and honestly I think is more rewarding for me. And for music, I'd say planning is very helpful in that the actual course load assigned for music is not a lot. Um, it's probably under 1.5 hours per course per week. But that's you're expected to also be practicing your instrument for a few hours a day. So planning when you're going to do that, seeing, oh, I'm going to be at the music school at this time, so I'll put in 45 minutes here between these two classes or something like that, or is very helpful. Keeping on top of that is important. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys very much. I'll end the recording here.